In un'epoca in cui le grandi ideologie sono ormai scomparse, solo l'ambiente è rimasto a fare da collante. Diane Cook, con un mondo quasi perfetto, ci trasporta in questo futuro non meglio identificato, in cui la vita nelle grandi città è diventata insostenibile. Bea e Agnes sono due donne. Agnes è condannata a morte, non può sopravvivere con lo smog della città e quindi deve trovare una soluzione. Esiste un'unica zona protetta al mondo, lo stato delle terre vergini, in cui la natura è rigogliosa e non è stato fino ad oggi ammesso nessun essere umano. Bea e Agnes sono parte di un esperimento per vedere se l'essere umano è in grado di convivere con la natura senza distruggerla. Si ritroveranno quindi lanciate in una Eden dove dovranno diventare cacciatori, raccoglitori, come l'evoluzione dell'umanità ci ha insegnato. Ma lo stato delle terre vergini non è il paradiso terrestre, è la natura vera, è una natura dura, è una natura che deve essere domata senza essere umiliata. Bea e Agnes vengono inserite in questo gruppo di prova all'interno dello stato delle terre vergini. Scopriranno che tutto va conquistato, scopriranno i tradimenti degli altri esseri umani, scopriranno che la natura può anche ucciderti. Non solo lo smog ti uccide, ma anche la natura. Scopriranno soprattutto un'altra cosa, che il rapporto madre-figlia non è nulla di garantito e deve essere conquistato giorno per giorno. E scoprirà, soprattutto Agnes, che una figlia non è un atto di egoismo, ma è qualcosa che devi imparare a lasciare volare via mano a mano che il processo di crescita continua. Una bellissima storia che ci riporta nelle atmosfere di Cormac McCarthy con La strada e con un sopraffino stile letterario.
I do love being outdoors. I camp a lot. I used to hike a lot before I had kids. And I think I weirdly have absorbed a lot about the natural world over the years, even though I live in Brooklyn, New York. I mean, my daily life is very city. But I do have this love of nature and experience in the outdoors. But as far as like surviving something as extreme as what occurs in the book, I think I'm actually quite weak when I think I'm not a survivor. I think in the situations that I create in my books, like I don't think I would survive. And so I think that's part of what's so interesting to me about the world is really I'm diving into a thing that I don't really understand and can't do. And that makes it that much more interesting and exciting for me as a writer. Well, the book is about a future world that has been kind of denigrated by climate change, pollution, overpopulation. All the resources that we need to live are really rare at this point. And so it's a hard life for people. I imagine a world where everyone has kind of had to congregate in a big city area called the city. And the rest of the land that's still useful is used for like food and mining and like getting all the resources that we need in order to support the population. But it's a terrible life in the city. It's dirty, it's polluted, it's bad for kids, people die, and it's just it's a different time, it's a different culture with different things that are important to it, and it's a tough life, and it's a short life for a lot of people. So I imagined that there would always be there's always a group of people who want something better. There's always a group of people who want to venture out and find something better. So I imagined that a group of people from the city would go and live in the very last wilderness that exists in this country. And they would go and live there and see if there was any chance for people to still connect with nature or live in nature or be a part of nature. They wanted to see if there's anything beyond the city, if you can live life like we used to, because the life that we're living now is not very good. So this group of people wanders around this really wild place, living off the land, subjected to the dangers of the wilderness, and they try and survive. And it is a life and death book. It is about people surviving day to day. Like I said, there's a group of people, but it really does focus on a mother and a daughter. The mother has brought the daughter to the wilderness to save her, because in the city, she's not going to survive. It's too polluted. It's too hard. It's too hard for her little body and her little lungs. So the mother takes her to this wilderness, even though that's going to be hard too, to try and help her survive. But it's a big sacrifice. And the book looks a lot at how mothers cope with the big sacrifices that they make for their kids. When I set out to write, I had an idea of the book about 8 years before it came out. And back then it was just this kind of wild idea. What if we as a civilization became so evolved and lost touch so much with the natural world? Like, what would it look like to have a group of people go back and try and reconnect with it? So it was, while it was always a speculative future looking novel in my mind, as time moved on and as the world got stranger and more dangerous in natural ways, even like including climate change or even just like global politics, the book started to just take on more meaning. And I think the world started to become even more strange. And it became much more realistic than it was when I first started writing it. When I first started writing, I was like, this is a real stretch. Will anyone really understand this world? It seems so foreign and so strange, but it doesn't seem that. Yeah, I think the use of the land is much older and has always been geared towards civilization. So in the US, it's a young country, and the people who lived there before the US became the US used the land very differently than we do now. So I imagined the book taking place in the American West. So there's, if my group of people who are the book follows this group of people, there's this very great myth of the American West and American pioneers moving out into the wilderness and and conquering it, taming it, whatever you want to call it, ruining it possibly. So it was in that tradition that I kind of thought about putting my people in an American Western wilderness. And I didn't really know what kind of area that was going to be until I ended up spending some time in what would be called the high desert of the United States in the West. It's a beautiful, arid, rugged place with lots of salt lakes and inhospitable terrain and really hot days and really cold nights and snow. It's a very high elevation, but it's not it's flat. It's a very very interesting place. It's very beautiful. It's stark. And the minute I saw this place and spent some time there, I knew that the book would take place there. It has an alien feel, and it's just so empty. And I really wanted to be able, the writer, to really get in touch with that sense of wide open spaces when I was imagining characters in. I think mothers and daughters have a very particular relationship. I don't really understand what that particular relationship is. I'm still parsing it with my own mother, who passed away several years ago. And I even try and parse it with my own daughter, who's only 4 years old. And I can already tell that there's just something different in our relationship than there is with my son, who's 2. I don't know what it is, but I think mothers and daughters have a very particular relationship. And I think there's a lot that gets passed down on the maternal line that is different maybe from what mothers pass on to sons or other. And And beyond exploring that particular relationship, I also just really wanted to focus on women and kind of the line of women and what gets passed down from mother to daughter to daughter to daughter to daughter. And it was really important to me to just spend time in those relationships and to let this group of women that are like the focus of the book survive in this wild, hard place, and to see how they would do it. Because we have a lot of nature writing, especially in the United States, it's very male centric. It's always the men who go out, and their stories of adventure or of survival are the ones that get recorded for history. And it felt like I didn't want to write another story like that about John. I wanted to write about Agnes, and see how she would do it. I was trying to think about different power structures when I was writing the book, and how people both share power or take power, or how power how it like envelops us or covers us. A lot of different power structures in the book. There are, the people who live in the wilderness, but there's also this group of rangers who are kind of in charge of the wilderness, and some have a friendly relationship with the people, some don't. There's this greater power, the governmental power that's always kind of this entity like in the background of all the decisions that get made. And then there's just the interpersonal power. There's the power between Bea and Agnes as mother and daughter, and that shifts over the course of the book. And that doesn't really give anything away, but like the power structures are always shifting among the people, with different changes that come. And I found that that happened organically as I was writing, because I think it's like very human for us to just always be grappling with where we are in a situation, in a hierarchy, and how we let go or take power, or how we want it or don't want it. I mean, there's different characters in the book that want it and other characters who don't. Some characters who like really believe in a kind of consensus community, and others who want to rule. And just having those relationships exploring those relationships among the people in the book, the characters in the book, it told me a lot about who the people were. So it was like figuring that stuff out helped me, I don't know, discover the characters' like inner selves more. There's also like political things about the book. I don't know if it would resonate as much with Italian readers, but I mean, perhaps. I was writing the book during like a lot of the border conflict in the United States and Mexico, where our president at the time, Trump, was putting people in like prisons basically. And it was this a really terrible time and a terrible situation. And the argument about immigration in the United States is so raw, and it just never seemed to get settled. So as I was writing the book, the wilderness and people's access to it, and people's sense of ownership over it or sense of estrangement from it, really began to me to take on the tenor of the migration issue in the United States. So there's people who are welcome and not welcome. There are people who find themselves in the wilderness, who it's like a very inhospitable land after they think it's going to save them, but it's actually so difficult to be there. So, I mean, that's like, there are a lot of different, I mean, there's like climate change and overpopulation and power struggles in the book, but there are also these undercurrents of like migration debates or immigration from any country that you can imagine, just the hardship of that process and of finding yourself in a strange place that you thought would help your family, but it doesn't end up doing that.